Okay, welcome to Talking Niagara on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And this is Friday, November 1st. Yeah, the best month of the year. Best month of the year. All right. Okay, and just to let everybody know, something I discovered in the last 24 hours is that any comments made on YouTube live don't get moved to the to the show after the live session has gone.
Okay.
Right, I only discovered that yesterday, but anyway, I'd like to let people know that. But I don't understand why. But and somebody also said it wasn't accepting comments, but I couldn't see any reason why that was the case.
I don't know.
Yeah.
These apparatuses are weird. I watched a speech on Wednesday night on at the meeting, at our Toastmaster meeting, and it was on video for us because the person who was giving the speech was one of our members that was trying something on that she couldn't come to the meeting to do. What happened was she thought she was being displayed as the main part of the video and her slides and stuff were part of the background, but it was the reverse for us. All we saw was a little tiny her and a huge big slide.
Yeah.
So
In fact,
and she was surprised to find that out. Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, actually, that's an interesting thing. I have to give a slideshow in a couple of weeks' time, and I've got my slides prepared, and I was actually showing them in video on my two-screen monitor at work, and oh my gosh, it's kind of so I've got on one monitor I've got the full slide, the current slide. On the other monitor, I've got the slides, the current slide, the next slide, and my notes from the slide.
Yeah. So if you're broadcasting it, you have to be careful that it's not coming out as you think it is.
Yeah, this is what I'm going to have to do a pre-trial with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that part of the speakers that we were watching, part of her reason she was trying out a speech that she has to give today, actually.
Yeah.
And part of what she wanted us to see is how she moved in her space, how her hand motions and things like that, and how she fit into the space.
But when she's only a tiny little square in the corner, you can hardly see that.
Yes.
And that's fine. That's fine for my speech. I don't really want to be, unless I'm turning the slideshow off for a moment, I don't want to be anything but a little tiny person in the corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good to understand that. Yeah. All right. Okay. So tribute next Friday. There's a tribute to Rick Rose.
Yeah, November 7th, there's a tribute to Rick Rose at Big Texas Niagara. I guess it's the bar, isn't it?
Big Texas at 5769 Ferry Street, Niagara. Yeah. Currently, there's 156 tickets remaining at $25 a ticket.
How many were there?
Well, there's currently, and I'm sitting on the site where you can purchase the tickets. There's 156 tickets available remaining.
Okay. Well, this is a nice tribute. Of course, I saw this article and I put it up there for us to discuss. It's really something else that we were able to give a tribute to Rick, and I still have a hard time believing that he's not there.
Yeah. Same here.
The whole idea that he died like that, it was quite a shock to me because I would go into that studio every once a month, maybe a little more frequently, and I would see Rick there doing his thing with the signs. How you doing, Dave? And sometimes we'd be sitting in the front there just chatting about one thing or another. I had no idea.
Exactly. And every time you go in there, you'd be chatting about something or other, right?
Yeah.
He was always, you know, I can't say I know him exceptionally well, but I knew him well enough. He was always open and talkative, etc., etc. This has been hosted by Shane Christopher Neal, and the evening will consist of 2 groups of 5 singer-songwriters who are going to play an original song and 1 song from Rick's amazing catalogue. Right? So they've got Group 1. It starts at 7:30. Group 1, they've got Aaron Berger, Dan Diggins, Rita Vizza, Andy Colonico, and Ryan Lunn. And in Group 2, they've got Angela Siracusa, Martin Murray, Frankie P., Paul Antonio, and Ivan Rotella. And we've got also special guests Dylan Martz, Chico Sanchez, and Rob Repobs. And all the proceeds are going to the Rick Rose Music Foundation.
Yes. So it's going to be a good thing. I don't know if I'm going to be around November 7th, but if I am, I'll try.
Yeah.
Myself.
Yeah.
Sounds like a musician's thing, though. Really, I mean, I suppose everybody's invited, but it sounds like a musician's thing, you know?
Yeah, it's a great thing, and wish everybody, you know, wish them all well on that. And when I looked at this yesterday, when you first sent this yesterday, I looked at the actual ticket page, and there was about 200 tickets available at that point. So they've been selling.
Yeah. I would also like to point out that the proceeds of all this will be going to supply music equipment to the schools in and around here.
Yeah. That's what the Rick Rose Music Foundation is all about, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's that need. At one time, music was part of the curriculum of almost every school, and because of cutbacks and all the other stuff, it is becoming less and less for those students. And there is also when a friend of mine died, we had a GoFundMe to raise some money for instruments for the schools. And what we found out, well, with the guy who was running it, I didn't have much to do with that. I just wrote a few things about it. And that was at the time I had a broken hip, so it wasn't really
way back a while back. Yeah, I remember.
And what he did, we got the GoFundMe, and what we found out was there were students that couldn't afford the extracurricular. Like, some of the schools had extracurricular music programs, and they cost a small amount of money, but there's kids that couldn't afford it, so we kind of helped that out. And instruments that needed to be repaired or bought.
Yeah.
And those, so we supplied those. I think we got a GoFundMe of about over $3,000 when a buddy of mine died.
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah. Okay. Mike makes the point he was sick for a long time, just didn't tell anybody.
Yeah.
No, and I found that out, and that made the whole thing even sadder. And especially since sometime last year, I remember he and Rose were actually playing, playing on stage together at one point again.
Yeah. Oh, well. Anyway, this is a nice tribute to Rick, and I hope things work out very well.
Yeah. So do I. All right. Another one from which you gave us yesterday, which we didn't get to. The safe drug center at the detention center is turning out to be anything else but.
Yeah, there's a big problem with this. And of course, what you want to do is, on the surface, like, okay, you for drug addicted uh, prisoners, basically,
Yeah.
you want to you want to actually provide safe drugs for them because they're going to get drugs inside.
Yeah.
That's just all there is to it. So what do you want to do? And of course, what we think, well, we'll provide safe drugs and methadone and things like this, and see if we can help. But that's not working out too well, is it?
Yeah. And it's weird because, in fact, actually, it is a solution that's being commended by a lot of. If you do the research into safe drug supplies at prisons, there's actually a lot of commentators that say it's an important aspect, and it's vital for our prisons that they have safe drug supply within the prisons, because, as you say, it's commonly documented that a large number of prisoners are on drugs, and the feeling has been that it would be better to actually ensure a safe supply. And this is where most of the writings have been. If I'm like, I'm like, well, surely that's an aberration, and but there's a lot of recommendations for safe drug supply, but I've not seen any other examples where the opposite impact is occurring. I'm just curious as to why we get the problem.
Well, this is the part of what precipitated this article. Actually, was we've had five people die in the detention
Yeah,
center, haven't we?
yeah,
Overdoses.
yeah,
Now, what happens is, so you think, okay, well, to do the right thing, you now supply prisoners with cleaner, better drugs, and possibly support them in rehabilitation at that particular time. What happens though is those drugs become extremely coveted. They're worth a lot of money,
uh,
and the cleaner drugs can be then sold off for other drugs where you can get more quantity but less quality. And the prisoners that do have inmates that do get these drugs then can be bullied and beat up and whatever else because they now have these drugs or can get them. So what it does is this causes a great big problem inside. Uh, uh, what they've
yeah.
really come across with
So
is
it's
that it
part of
hasn't worked.
yeah.
It hasn't worked.
It becomes, instead of what was a safe supply idea, to becoming a resupply idea for illegal drugs within the prison.
It basically says, let's see, witnesses are appeared via video testimonies. They say the inquest examining the deaths of Timothy Anderson, Murray Below, David Cow, Michael Croft, and Jarrell Lungs, who were at the Remain Center between 2018 and 2022. So it's mandatory that this happens now. And it says here, I think if you have a harm reduction strategies, you get people using because it's there. It's just a stopgap until they return to the community where they return to their old habits. Well, basically what they're saying is even if you do give them drugs and even if it doesn't cause problems, all you're doing is maintaining their addiction until they get out, where they now go back on the streets and they don't get good quality drugs anymore. And it kind of, although on one hand, it sounds to be a humanitarian thing to give them cleaner drugs to supply their habit, ones that will be less debilitary. But on the other hand, all you're doing is maintaining the addiction. So when they get out, they're now no longer in such a safe environment. Are you doing them any favor?
Yeah.
What about just once they get into detention, just put them on detox right away and let them go through the withdrawal systems?
Yeah, and in a way, if you're in prison for a number of months, detoxing, a detox regime should be on the surface relatively easy because they're in a controlled space.
And here's the skinny on it. 2 of the subject men overdosed, one on fentanyl, the other on fentanyl and methamphetamine.
Mm-hmm.
A third died of methadone toxicity. That's methadone is the stuff that you use to try to withdraw yourself from addiction.
Yeah.
So obviously they got a bunch of methadone, and they may have got that right inside, because that's the type of thing they use to ease addiction withdrawal. The autopsy on the 4th inmate found he died from toxic levels of fentanyl and etazamolone, which is a sedative which they often add to it, and noted plastic bag fragments in his stomach.
Oh.
Yeah, so he may have just, I don't know, taken the whole bag or something. I don't know. The 5th inmate died from the one that had the plastic bag in his stomach may have felt that they took the bag and hoped in order to excrete it later when they went to the bathroom, which is a kind of thing they do. They either hoop the drugs, which is put them in a condom and run them up the rectum. However, the police and the guards are hip to that kind of thing, so they search for it. The other way is to put it into your stomach and then discharge it through your waist a little later and collect it, and then you can sell it. So this bag may have burst in the guy's gut and then killed him from an overdose. The 5th inmate died from a combination of fentanyl and cocaine due to intentional ingestion or systematic absorption from the bag in his rectum that may have leaked. So one of the things that particularly the guys that come in on the weekends, there are inmates that come in on weekends to do their time in weekends.
Yeah,
and what they'll do is they'll hoop the drugs. In other words, they'll put them in a condom, grease them up, and use them like a suppository. When they're searched, of course, nothing of that kind can be found, and then they later extract them and sell them for big money. The other way, of course, is to put them in your stomach and hope that it will discharge without being digested. Obviously, a couple of these went badly for these inmates, and they died of overdoses.
Yeah, but that's not
another rapid way of unfortunately, another way of rapidly ingesting a drug, making a small amount of drug more effective, is to put it into your large intestine. Because your large intestine, it reabsorbs the water from your waste. It will then go into your bloodstream, and a smaller amount of drug will do the same thing. And some alcoholics even do that. They put an enema into their with alcohol into their large intestines, and a lot of alcohol deaths happen that way. And the purpose of that, of course, is just to get more bang for your buck, basically. And
generally speaking, I would have the view that generally speaking, prisoners should be encouraging them to dry out, get off the drugs. But because these ways where they're pulling these drugs in, it's clearly scouting around the safe drug center concept, right?
It says here, when an inmate under the influence returned to the unit, in other words, he's gone to someplace in the prison, got a safe drug, his safe drugs that they give him to help him with his addiction. So when an inmate under the influence returns to the unit, how does that look? It causes potential security and safety risks for everybody in the institution.
Yeah.
Stowe told that inquest that drugs sold in jail fetch exceptionally higher prices than the same quantity on the street. Other inmates will know the guys are using the program, and they're going to get into trying to extort them, have them hoard it, and abuse the program. So basically, it's even though humanitarily it sounds like a good idea, but it's a bad idea overall. So what the suggestion here is to just as soon as they come into jail, start them on withdrawal.
Yeah, exactly. Dry them out, as Mike says, right? And generally speaking, I've always preferred the fact that why can't they use prison as a as a detox center?
Well, because an addict will get the drugs no matter what. There are drugs in prison. They get in somehow, one way or another, and it says here, just as I just said, they're exceptionally. I think 4 times as much you get on the street. So the addict will get them anyway.
And again, for the title to have been saying for the title of the article to be safe drug supply has the opposite impact. At least a couple of those are actually illicit supply is causing as the cause of the death.
Yeah, it's illicit supply, but it also, those people who are on the program, as he said, when somebody leaves the unit, comes back and is obviously stoned under the influence, the other inmates are going to put pressure on them to try to hoard that drug that they were given and bring it back into the unit and sell it. And the other thing too is if you can get some high quality drugs, to put a term to it, from whatever dispensary they have there, and you somehow were able to get it out of there, you're going to be able to trade it for more less quality drugs.
Yeah.
And that's what's problem with injection sites or user sites for addicts in cities. What happens is they get a better quality of drug there, then they take that drug, trade it for more bad drugs, so they have more supply but of less quality.
Mike is of the opinion that I'm right about the needing for use of this as detox.
Yeah, that's the best way to go, but there may have to be some sort of means by which they
probably would have to segregate
withdrawal, and that doesn't mean going on a methadone program. It means that daily they'll have to come to a place where they're injected lower amounts of drug.
Maybe that means that they have to segregate them.
That would be a good idea.
Yeah. And that's about all I can really think of in that particular aspect.
Yeah, really, because maintaining their addiction inside
is bad.
Puts them at risk. And also when they go back outside, they're what got them in problem was likely their addiction. What made them a criminal in the first place.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on. The Canadian dollar is trading at the lowest level since 2020. It's gone under 72 cents US a dollar. So it's a really bad state at the moment.
We're getting beat up pretty good here.
Yeah.
All the different factors of which we talked about throughout the last few months, basically, is well, of course, to sound like a parrot, our production levels are really bad, but our core economic system is not sound right now, and
we've been.
Okay,
yeah, the other thing, of course, is that high interest rates also attract people to invest in that currency, because it means the currency with interest rates, actually, their investment is growing, doesn't it?
Well, that's the catch-22.
Yeah.
That's the catch-22. Once again, if you have high interest rates, that makes your currency attractive to investors, those people who invest in currencies. However, if the currency is high, then your exports and other things you produce
are more expensive,
are less attractive because they cost more.
Yeah, and in fact, actually, that is for everything that costs $1. everything that costs $1 in the US, it's $1.30 or something in Canada, right? So there's no and everybody in Canada knows what the ticket price is in the store in the US, right? So when it's 30% more expensive in a Canadian store, of course it hurts us.
Yeah, of course. You got a lot less cross-border shopping these days, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons our weak Canadian dollar. Well, the weak Canadian dollar comes from a number of different factors, and one of the factors is like that controversial oil and gas production we have out west, because so much of our international economic wherewithal is based on what, the 11% or something of our country's wealth comes from natural gas and oil. We have abundant supplies of oil and natural gas. Now, this is extremely controversial, of course, because on the one hand, we're trying to reduce the amount of oil and gas being used. So we think if we reduce the amount of production, that's going to be good. Well, that's not good, because those people who use oil and gas will just buy it from somewhere else. So so when the price of oil goes down, which it has gone down, that affects our economy, because so much of our GDP comes from oil exports.
Yeah.
And then you have the threat of tariffs. If Donny Boy, Teflon Don, down south, wins the election, and he looks as at least as likely to get the election as Kamala Harris, he has talked about tariffs, a lot of tariffs. And tariffs, actually, he thinks that tariffs will supplant income tax, collect tariffs off. He reckons everybody wants to sell stuff to the United States. If they do, he'll hit the tariffs, and that tariff revenue will at least slow down income tax, or at least replace lots of it. As far as I can see, it's not a sound economic reasoning.
I don't think so either. I've looked at that, and I'm kind of reading through that whole concept, and I'm like, yeah, it's not going to end up getting rid of income tax.
Yes, but the very fact that he's talked about tariffs as much as 125%, a minimum of 25%, really shutting down China's imports into the United States. And also, that means the tariffs on Canadian products. Remember, when he was in as a president, he put tariffs on Canadian products. And when the Biden government came in, they didn't repeal those tariffs at all.
Yeah.
So they must have been getting some benefits from them by putting the tariffs on them. Otherwise, they would have taken the tariffs off. So if Canadian goods, services, and natural resources will now have tariffs on them more than before, that's a threat to the Canadian economy in a big way. And that's another thing.
It is, that's for sure.
That's another thing that's keeping the Canadian dollar so low, is that okay, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and that's a crucial reasoning why the Canadian dollar is it's not an all-time low, but it's trading very low. It's trading much lower than it really should. But also, I think that we've talked about the state of the economy, and whilst the bank is reducing the interest rate, which is not helping Canada, it has to respond to the stagnation in our economy.
Yes, and the article points out. Well, I've watched a couple of things and read a couple of things, and it's basically this: that when the interest rates have come down, the United States economy reacted very, very favorably, and their economy is very strong. Ours, on the other hand, did not. Ours went the other way, and that's why the panic half a point drop in interest rate last week or the week before. That's why the Canadian bank dropped the interest rate as fast as it did in one fell swoop, 50 points right away, because that our economy that was supposed to respond to the previous interest rate drops did not, but the United States one did. So what you have is the United States going up, responding as you would think it should.
Yeah.
Ours did not. So what is wrong, fundamentally wrong with our economy, that it will not respond to lower interest rates? That's a dangerous thing. Usually when the interest rates go down, then you invite investment.
Well, this is actually one of the complaints of the building industry, and one of the reasons why we're no longer on target for those home build targets is because, of course, the cost of borrowing has delayed so many projects.
Yeah, well, that's not there right now. The borrowing is there, but there's still other economic factors that are there. And as we talked about yesterday, why Ontario was not going to meet its records, its levels of housing that it promised.
Yeah, and it's not just the building industry, building trades; it's other things as well. And Mike is basically saying our government got addicted to real estate and overpricing and property tax. Meanwhile, no one can afford a home in this country. It's a trouble, all due to runaway real estate.
That was a big factor. That's a big factor that's not often talked about. And you'd have to go to the Globe Mail to get stuff like that. What happens and we talked about this the other day, when the real estate boom was going like crazy, the government was making huge money.
Yeah. So Chris Simone is asking about what the pros and cons of tariffs are, and essentially the question of tariffs is that it's like a sales tax, but it's like a sales tax, HST, but it's HST that's at a higher percentage because you got it from China or from Bangladesh or from Mexico.
Yeah, the steel tariffs is a good. The steel wars that we had back some time ago is a good example of that.
It is, yeah.
What happened was every industrial one of the most basic things of the Industrial Revolution was the production of steel. Once the Bessemer process had been established, it made the ability for just about any country to make steel if they had the components to do it: coal, lime, and iron ore. So it's a very simple process. People have been using it for 200 years. What is a problem, though, is every industrial country has steel production, and it gets to the point where it has the capacity to make more steel than it needs, but it wants to keep its iron and steel production going. So what it does with its excess steel is it dumps it on other markets at a cheaper rate. So Japanese can make steel, and if they remove the taxes on it, they'll bring it to Canada and they'll sell it here cheaper than we can make it.
Yeah.
And so that means we put a tariff on it to protect our own steel industry. And when we were selling steel to the United States,
but again, there's something.
When we were selling steel to the United States under the NAFTA agreement, we could sell it to them cheaper than they could make it. So they put on a temporary tariff on our steel, saying that it was government subsidized. That turned out not to be true, but it took 4 years to determine that. So Canada was vindicated, but in the meantime, it lost out a lot of sales.
And the net impact of that is with something like steel is if the cost of steel, if there's a tariff on making steel or imported steel, for example, because steel is the foundation of so many other products that we make, of course, that price increase gets felt all the way up the tree, doesn't it?
Yes. Now the other one was a big issue. The NAFTA agreements, the trade agreements we had in the United States, was cheese and dairy products. Cheese and dairy products are a big issue in Quebec. That's part of their economy there. But the United States and Mexico can make them a lot cheaper than we can. So what we do in order to protect the dairy industry in Canada, we put tariffs on the dairy that comes from the United States or Mexico or anywhere else.
Yeah.
So that when you buy an American block of cheese, it's the same price or more than the Canadian one, even though they can produce it cheaper than we can. Now, ideally, they would, in a free trade system, the cheaper cheese would take over and the consumer would get a break. But on the other hand, you would lose all those jobs. So that's what tariffs are maintained to do.
Yeah. And Chris comes back and says, so the incentive is to build products here, and the con for that is that it would be more expensive to buy for customers.
Yeah, that's right. That's why you can't find a T-shirt or a shirt made anywhere other than China or Bangladesh or Vietnam,
because even if you put because even if you put 100% tariff on it, it's still cheaper than what we can make here in this country.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so the double-edged sword basically is you lose a job, but you get cheaper materials for those people who do have jobs.
Yeah. Okay. And the other thing Mike is saying is the only people making money are the rich. This country has abandoned the average Canadian, overlooking how poor we all are.
This is a general unfortunately, in a democracy that's a capitalist democracy, money begins to go to fewer and fewer places. That's just the nature of capitalism. And once capitalism digs itself in, you have to have it super regulated. Otherwise, the capitalists are the ones that will win most of the money. So what we have going on in the last couple of generations are clever people who limit the amount of taxes that the rich have to pay, which makes them richer and richer, which gives them more power to influence government to make them even more richer. And we see the factor of the 1%ers have more than 30 million families, like 50 families have more than 30 million families of wealth. That's the wealth disparity. And when you have that wealth disparity, and when you have fewer and fewer people with more and more money, those people become more and more powerful to influence the government to keep them that way. And Mike is quite right. The rich are getting expensive, and they're drawing their expense out of us, the middle class, little by little by little. We are slowly going down, and they are rapidly going up.
Yeah.
Like Walmart, the Walmart family, and we talked about inherited wealth the other day here, and the families of inherited wealth, the ones that were not the innovators that started, let's say, Walmart, are making incredible money. So the daughters and the grandsons and the sons and the daughters and the grandsons and
they're the richest
down the line have inherited wealth that they did not get by innovation as their parents or grandparents did. Let's say the Walton family.
Well, the Walton family.
Let me finish this up. So they have this inherited wealth. So they are not the innovators that bring new innovation in, but they have the wealth of those, and the returns are thousands of percent. Whereas if I made an investment back 20 years ago, and I would be lucky to make a 20% return on it, they're making thousands of percent returns on theirs, 2,000% returns, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, and the Walton family is probably the richest family in America. Certainly one of the richest families on the planet. I mean, as you say, the current generations, the grandsons, etc., of the founders have done nothing to earn that money.
No, they weren't the innovators.
Yeah, they're not innovators. Yeah, and that's a problem. That's a problem that capitalism faces, because second or third generation, people with wealth don't innovate, and that is because they're not turning it back into society and making society more exciting, more new. bringing new things along.
Well, what happens is in the old days, what would happen is the family fortune. Let's say Dave Wheeler. Let's say I invented a widget, and it's the most popular one around. I make a lot of money making this widget, and then I pass away, and my fortune goes off to my kids and my relatives. So that fortune now is broken down into smaller pieces, and it is less relevant. That doesn't happen anymore. What happens is I make the widgets, then I protect my wealth with tax dodges or whatever else, and I can set up everybody in the same way where their income continues to increase. It's like my inheritance towards them comes with a money growing system, basically, because of tax dodges and innovations like that. So what you're having really now is they call it the American oligarchy, and it is a silver spoon oligarchy. But what in a kind of analogy, it's like feudal lords again.
Yeah,
it's like a small amount of people are the barons and the dukes and the lords of all the land, and the rest of us are becoming more like serfs.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So moving on. Isn't it a Niagara Falls man was banned from having a 3D printer in the wake of a firearms conviction, and this dates back to he was arrested in 2023, and for firearms, so for trading firearms, November 2023, so last year, a year ago almost, and part of the cash of what they recovered was 3D printers, as well as a whole bundle of firearms. And he's been he was charged with trafficking, manufacturing, and the possession of weapons or firearms for sale.
Guns. Our neighbors to the south have lots of guns, and we can see what the result of that is. They have incredible high murder rates, gun violence, and we don't want that here. We don't want that here at all. And we try to regulate who gets a firearm and when. I have no problem with a responsible person owning a firearm for hunting, using a firearm for target practice. I do have a problem with somebody with a semi-automatic because I can't really see the use of that. But one of the ways we can regulate it is how we sell it, how we license it, and all that other stuff. But if somebody's got a 3D printer, how do you control that?
Yeah. Well, you can make a lot of things with 3D printers. And what this guy was making was basically he was taking firearms and making parts for firearms off his 3D printer.
Yes, and putting them together.
Yeah.
Now he did have a couple of legal guns, and one of the ones that stands out to me is the 1915 Lee Enfield. Yeah. That would have been a real collector's item, I think. He had a Cooey sure shot rifle and a Big Sauer handgun. Sig Sauer, pardon me.
Sig Sauer handgun, yeah. The Lee Enfield 1915 rifle. That's a rifle that was used by I think that's American troops in the First World War, wasn't it?
Well, it was probably also the British troops, obviously, because even the Canadians switched over to an Enfield because the Ross rifle, which the Canadians had produced, was a fabulous gun, but it had its tolerances were too close, and it got jammed up in the plus the fact that the Brits wanted to make the ammunition, so they didn't make the Ross rifle bullet that well to save money, so we were stuck with British bullets. So we had to end up going over to the Enfield because it had less tolerances, and the Ross rifle ended up being a good sniper rifle. But as far as that goes, this is a dangerous thing. And he got off rather soft, don't you think? when you he was
what
his
did he?
house arrest basically.
Yeah, house arrest is very soft. Yeah.
Now, I think the reason why is because he has had no previous criminal actions. But the reason how they got to him is very interesting. They were after a drug dealer, and then they checked the drug dealer's phone, and they got his address and got a warrant to go in there. I imagine they suspected they would find drugs, but what they did find was a 3D printer and guns. If he is in communication with a drug dealer and he's got guns on a 3D printer, to me that's ominous.
Yeah.
I don't know why they give him such a soft
I think I think that's basically almost a license to go back to work, isn't it? So he's banned from having 3D printers. How are you going to stop him?
How are you going to stop him from getting another one? He's got a 10-year ban of owning any guns. He can't own any guns for 10 years. And he's on house arrest, basically.
Yeah, but all he needs to do is figure out a way to smuggle them in and smuggle them out, make sure they're hidden from, because a lot of what he was doing, according to the bits I was reading, it seemed like he was taking guns that had either been partially dismantled, partially or were broken, and actually using this 3D printer to repair, to manufacture parts in order that he could replace those parts.
Yeah, but you know what, though? The kind of guns they retrieved there by the picture didn't look too good to me, did it? Those are styles of guns. Well, he may be repairing guns, but
I'm not an expert on guns, so I couldn't tell you.
I think doing a few weekends in jail might wake up a guy like that. Like, I mean, I think he's probably a little bit of nerdy dude.
Yeah,
he may have been using drugs because he's got a drug dealer guy that's phoning him. So that tells me that he's been buying drugs or probably buying drugs. And when they went,
yeah, maybe not. He may just be a supplier, a weapons supplier to them.
I will. Well, if he is, then he really should be thrown in the can. If he's supplying weapons to drug dealers, he should be thrown in the can for a good long time.
Yeah, but probably the police didn't have any evidence of that, right?
Maybe not, but they have evidence of illegal guns, and shouldn't there be a consequence of that? And you do have a connection.
I agree. Don't get me wrong. I'm not denying what you're saying. I'm just pointing out. I'm just pointing out some other things, right? I'm not denying that he should be thrown in the slammer. I'm disgusted by the fact that he gets off so lightly.
Yeah, as house arrest. Now, I don't. They're giving him quite a break here, and 8 months of the sentence will be served under house arrest. Yeah, they're giving him a bit of a break here. If the justice system feels this is a point where they can turn him back to being, not sort of dilly-dallying with the criminal element and not messing with firearms, which these firearms, which he's repairing, could do a whole lot of damage. I'm not just talking to drugs. Some nutcase could get one. And as we've seen in the United States, mass murderers in Canada use a car or a knife. Mass murderers in the United States use semi-automatic weapons with a bump stock to make them automatic.
Well, one of these weapons looks semi-automatic to me, but again, I'm not an expert in guns. Many of these rifles are actually single shot, or you have to action reload, right? But at least one of them looks semi-automatic to me.
Well, he's also got a big magazine. He was also charged with an overcapacity magazine, and you don't do that with bolt action guns.
Yeah.
you do it with semi-automatics. So there is bolt action guns. There is some here that look like semi-automatics. It's quite a stash. Yeah, this, and one of them is a sniper rifle with a tripod on it.
Yeah.
He's messing here, and lots of ammo. He's messing with some dangerous things here. I don't like guns. I don't like people with massive amounts of guns. I think if you're a hunter, you got shotguns or you got high-powered guns to bring down a moose or something, fine, no problem. But when you're messing with the kind of guns here, there is no purpose for them other than violence.
Yeah, and these, none of these are hunting rifles.
Yeah, well, the one with the scope and the tripod on it, you could argue that you could lay in a blind with that and pick down
you could make that argument, but it is actually camouflage, which would more likely mean that it's being it's a former army weapon.
I don't. Well, for some reason they came off soft on him. I think anyone with these kind of guns, the kinds of guns he has here, can do a lot of damage. And like he said before, he had one of the magazines he had was over capacity. Yeah. So when you have that kind of thing going on, you're not thinking about hunting. You're not. No. And to go down, anybody that's caught with illegal guns should have a much more serious judgment against them because of the potential of damage that these guns can do going into the wrong hands. And enough of them get into the wrong hands, even with our strong regulatory process. Anybody with the illegal guns, I think, I don't know, should guns like this should be treated with much more sternness.
Okay, so I do hope that they destroyed all these guns. I hope that they also put the valuable ones like the Lee Enfield rifle into a museum.
I know they can hold it for him. Somebody can hold it for them for 10 years. He can get them back in 10 years. The ones that he had legally. Now he had a handgun legally, so he must have gone through some sort of regulatory process. So he had 3 illegal guns, including a handgun. And it takes a bit of effort to get one of those. However, I think the guy has to go to jail for at least on weekends.
I think he needs to go
as a stern reminder of this is where you're going to go if you continue down this road.
Absolutely.
It may be the deterrent he needs. House arrest may not be that.
I don't think so either. I really don't think so. Yeah. I'm not in favor of house arrest for crimes like this, and we're way too lenient on gun crimes. Way too lenient.
I really don't want the gun culture that the United States has come up here. There are too many innocent victims of that.
Yeah.
I know all the time.
I know plenty of people here who I've got a friend here who, in fact, I have friends in Britain who are gun owners and who shoot at gun ranges all the time. Most of the time, their guns are actually under lock and key at the gun club, and when they're not under lock and key at the gun. Yeah, and when they're not under lock and key at the gun club, they're under lock and key at their own home.
Yeah, I have no problem with responsible gun users if they have proper lockups and they've gone through the proper regulatory system. I knew a guy who collected black powder weapons and some other rare guns. The police made a visit to his house suddenly. He lived in an apartment. They knocked on his door and they said, "We're the police. We're here to inspect your facilities for your guns." Just like that. It was he didn't know they were coming. They knocked on the door. "You better show them to us or we take them away." So he lets them in. He shows them his facilities that he had. He was up to code. They said, "Okay, fine, thank you. You're
Walk
doing
out.
everything you should."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And you know, had they, you know, say had they been, you know, had they been knocked on the door and he happened to have a gun out that was on the table that he was cleaning, that would have been okay as well.
Well, certainly, certainly.
You know,
He had the proper lockups. He had all the paperwork.
yeah,
He had done all the things he had to do. He had his licenses or whatever you need to have them. So the police were completely satisfied. He was doing what he's supposed to do. And if you do what you're supposed to do, then if we have this stronger regulations, maintain our stronger regulations up here than the States. I mean, yeah, I could walk in a Florida pawn shop and get a pistol
mm-hmm.
just like
Yeah,
that,
yeah,
you know. And if I had to wait, it would be a couple of days. So I could walk in, get a pistol, and walk down the road and shoot you if I
yeah,
wanted to. Remember that there was a guy in Drummond Road, I think it was Drummond or it was Portage Road, who got murdered, who got shot. He was a bully in the neighborhood, and he was bullying the people. And one of the people in the neighborhood walked over into the United States, bought a gun off the street, walked back, and a few days later, or a little while later, used that gun to kill that guy.
yeah,
You don't want that happening here.
yeah. We don't want that. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So this weekend is the weekend of the time change, and there's a Kevin Mehta, who's a pediatric respirologist and sleep medicine physician at McMaster Children's Hospital, has basically been saying that we end up with jet lag type symptoms when we go through the daylight saving time change. Well, I actually don't find. I actually find when we fall back into winter time, I actually don't mind that because I get an extra hour's sleep. I wake up whenever I wake up on the Sunday morning and go, oh, look at that! It's an hour earlier than I expected it to be. Great. It's always the spring one that gets me, the spring forward, because then I'm tired for the week.
Well, it always happens on what is it, Sunday night, isn't it? Or is it Saturday night?
Sunday.
Sunday night.
Not Sunday
right?
night, Saturday night. Yeah.
Saturday night. And I think the article is just bunk really because almost everyone has the weekends off.
Yeah.
Almost everyone. So in order for them to go through the time change, if they wake up, they go to bed at 11 o'clock and they normally wake up at 6 o'clock and it's 5 o'clock, or if they normally go to bed at 11 o'clock and they wake up and it's an hour later and spring forward, it really doesn't affect the average person that much.
It doesn't. No.
1 hour of adjustment is not a big deal.
Yeah. And I actually think it's bunk, but I think also I would prefer that we get rid of, that Ontario's already passed laws to remove the time change. It's just waiting on other provinces, or it's like waiting on US states or other provinces to actually enact it.
Yes, and well, there's a call to get. Well, the main thing with daylight saving time is it's been controversial ever since it's come in.
Yeah,
I think it was Sir Sanford Fleming that came up with the idea, or
in the 1920s, back in the 1920s.
Now, what it did do, it did preserve daylight for the times in which to put most of the daylight during the times in which people are most active.
Yes.
And in the 70s, the United States reevaluated daylight savings time and saw that by using daylight savings time, they saved 1% of the national energy. There's 1% energy savings in the United States, which was significant. And that energy saving still happens. However, nowadays, we may not be getting the benefits. The benefits may not be as positive as they used to be. So in modern times, the energy use may not be that bad, and the
Yeah.
benefits of daylight savings time may not
Well,
be that.
yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and the whole point is that I think some of that was because you'd go out, you'd have that extra hour in the summer to go out, and when it's June and it's extra, you've got that extra time in the evening. You're not using, you're not putting the AC, you're not putting power on in your house.
That's right. And remember, it was the industrial times that brought in daylight savings time. So you want your industrial systems or your working systems to happen during the times that the most daylight is happening.
Yeah.
So that's why you shift your clock around, because of the northern hemisphere. You won't find daylight savings times really anything relevant after below a certain latitude in the world.
It's about
above
50.
and below.
It's the Tropic of Capricorn and Cancer that you don't find daylight savings between, because it doesn't make any sense.
The farther north you go, the more relevant it is, until the point where it's no relevant because it's always dark or always light.
Yeah.
So there's this temperate zone there where it's during the early industrial times, it's very important, because then you can get your industrial workers out at the same time during the longest stretch of daylight, and that was important. But nowadays, and it never was relevant to farmers or agricultural workers, because they go out when the light comes up.
Yeah,
exactly. The cattle or whatever else have no time system, and they regulate themselves.
And in fact, actually, some farmers that I knew, they basically never bothered with their clocks anyway, because for them, they wake up at dawn or pre-dawn.
Yeah, so it depends on, when the birds start chirping, and the birds start chirping when the light comes on, whatever time that happens to be.
In fact, actually, they want to be up way before the light starts. The light comes up, because they need to be up and active when the light's up.
And a cow that needs to be milked doesn't look at the time.
No, exactly.
It has to be milked at the same time and regular. And it doesn't matter if that's 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock. So, so in agricultural zones like out west or the mid, though that daylight saving time is meaningless or much less relevant. And nowadays, because of the way in which we can regulate our industry and our society, we don't need as much daylight. To do that. At one time, you needed a fair amount of daylight to help you.
Yeah, and I'm a fan of, let's remove it. Let's go to Eastern summertime in the east.
Standard time.
Keep to a single time zone. Stop the switching. Right. We don't need it anymore.
Well, Prime Minister Ford or Premier Ford has suggested that, but he can't do it unless he
needs support of
agreement.
He
needs agreement with Quebec and the other and the states in the United States that are all affected by the same time zone, and it's important to us all. So if we have an agreement with New York State and Michigan and whatever else, and they all want to go to standard time, and we will too.
Yeah. And all it needs is actually three neighboring provinces or states to actually do it, and we'll be good.
Yeah. Well, that's still farther down the road. It's probably the least. It's probably the least important issue for the government these days. So, anyway.
All right. No, and absolutely, it's further down the road. And kind of, I guess that we've come to the end of our show. We had one more issue about immigration programs for permanent residents in Quebec being paused.
Well, we talked about immigration a lot, so we can skip that to next week.
Exactly.
I would just like to remind everybody that the whole Gaza war thing is becoming on the second or third page of the newspaper kind of thing, and we have become dulled to it. We have to remember that there are people being killed there daily. 10 children here, 15 children there, 20 innocent people there. That's just in Gaza, not to mention in Lebanon. We are becoming sort of immune and numbed to it all, and I really don't want us to become numb to the atrocities that are happening there, the outrages that are
But
happening.
actually, but again, Dave, though the Ukraine war has actually disappeared from the newspapers entirely.
Almost. It's the only thing that pops up there is Zelensky's sort of trying to get the everybody more interested in that war, or keep interested in that war. So all these wars have to end, but the one that is the most egregious is the one in Gaza. I mean, it just keeps going on and on and on. And the other day, the Israelis hit a hospital with newly received medical supplies, and they wiped out a lot of those medical supplies. And they said that Hamas was housed in there, and then there's denial on the other half of it. Obviously, they wanted to hit those medical supplies because they want to put pressure on the population. They're trying to put extreme pressure on the populations so they can give up their Hamas people, and they're also trying to starve them, and we're losing sight of that. And we're becoming numb to it day by day by day, and we should never forget it.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah. All right. So thank you, everybody, for being here the week. And Dave?
Without further ado, I bid you adieu.